The unexpected recruit. Admiral Kxthar's secondary mandibles twitched with barely contained irritation as he studied the holographic file floating before him. The Mantodine administrator's compound eyes reflected the scrolling text of what he considered the most absurd directive ever issued by the Galactic Council. You expect me to accept a human instructor at the most prestigious military academy in 3 spiral arms, he chittered, his crystalline desk vibrating with each syllable. The quantum communication beam showed only the vague outline of the council representative, but her amusement was clear even through the distortion. Not just any human, Admiral. Sergeant Jasmine Torres, Earth Special Operations Command. Her combat record speaks for itself. The Admiral's antennae flattened against his armored skull. Her species barely achieved spaceflight a century ago. They still use projectile weapons in some of their colonies. Yet they've won every engagement they've been in since joining the Federation, the representative countered. Including conflicts where they were outgunned and outnumbered. The Council believes there's something to learn from their methods. Kxthar's mandibles clacked in resignation. He knew a losing battle when he saw one. Very well. But she'll have to pass the same entry evaluations as any other instructor candidate. I won't lower our standards. She's already on her way. Arriving within the hour, actually. The Admiral's chitin nearly cracked from shock. What? Without proper protocols? Without. Good luck, Admiral. Council out. The quantum beam winked out, leaving Kxthar alone with his mounting anxiety. He activated the Academy-wide communication system. Lieutenant Commander Nixus to my office. Immediately. The crystalline tactical instructor materialized moments later, her translucent form refracting the office's ambient light. You seem disturbed, Admiral. Your biometrics are highly irregular. The Council has lost their collective minds, he began, but a notification interrupted him. A small transport had just entered the Academy's space. Its design was jarringly utilitarian compared to the elegant ships usually seen at Centauri Prime. Our new instructor has arrived. The Admiral managed to make the word instructor sound like a particularly distasteful parasitic infection. The landing bay's reception committee consisted of Kxthar, Nixus, and a handful of curious senior students who'd caught wind of the unusual arrival. The transport's airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and Sergeant Jasmine Torres stepped out. She stood just under 2 meters tall, tiny by Mantodine standards, with dark skin and close-cropped black hair. Her movements were fluid and purposeful, each step precisely measured. She wore a simple black uniform without insignia or decoration, carrying only a small duffel bag over one shoulder. Admiral Kxthar, she said, inclining her head slightly. Thank you for having me. The Admiral's translator struggled briefly with her accent before settling on a reasonable approximation. Sergeant Torres. Welcome to Centauri Prime Military Academy. I trust you understand that your unusual appointment requires thorough evaluation. Of course. She smiled, and several students took involuntary steps backward. Showing teeth was still considered a potential threat display among many species. When do we begin? Now, Nixus interjected, her crystalline form pulsing with barely contained curiosity. The combat assessment chamber is prepared. The Admiral's mandibles twitched again. He'd hoped to at least review basic protocols first, but perhaps it was better to get this over with quickly. Very well. Follow me. The assessment chamber was a massive geodesic dome filled with programmable matter. Its walls could reconfigure into any terrain or obstacle course, while gravity and atmospheric conditions could be adjusted to match thousands of known worlds. The challenge is simple, Nixus explained, her form sparkling with professional enthusiasm. Survive 5 minutes against increasingly difficult combat scenarios. Our adaptive AI will analyze your techniques and adjust accordingly. Jasmine set down her bag and rolled her shoulders. Any restrictions on methods? Just don't damage the facility, the Admiral chittered sarcastically. Several students laughed, their various forms of amusement creating an odd symphony of clicks, hums, and crystalline chimes. Understood. Jasmine moved to the center of the chamber, her bare feet silent on the metallic floor. She wore no armor, carried no weapons, and had declined the offered neural interface helmet. The Admiral gave the signal to begin, certain he was about to witness either a very short and embarrassing display or the fastest withdrawal of a council directive in history. The chamber's walls shimmed and flowed, creating a rugged landscape of sharp slopes and sudden drops. 3 combat drones materialized, their adaptive armor gleaming. Each was twice Jasmine's size and equipped with the latest in non-lethal suppression technology. What happened next would be analyzed and debated at the Academy for years to come. Jasmine moved like water, flowing around energy bolts and through force fields that should have held her. She used the terrain itself as a weapon, leading drones into impacts with each other and the landscape. When they adapted to her patterns, she changed them instantly, switching between fighting styles faster than the AI could analyze. For minutes in, all 3 drones lay scattered across the chamber in various states of disrepair. None of their attacks had landed. The human stood calmly in the center, breathing only slightly elevated. "Interesting program," she said into the stunned silence. "The drones favor their right side slightly. Might want to look into that." Admiral Kxthar's mandibles worked soundlessly for several moments before he found his voice. "How, that is, what combat system was that?" "All of them." Jasmine picked up her bag. "Humans don't really do just one style. We adapt. Mix things up. Use whatever works." She glanced at the astonished faces around her. "When do I start teaching?" Trial by combat. News of the humans' performance in the assessment chamber spread through Centauri Prime Military Academy like a quantum cascade failure. Within days, Sergeant Torres's first class was filled beyond capacity, with students from 17 different species crammed into the training arena. "Your attack algorithms are predictable," Jasmine explained, circling a hovering energy being named Zrthak. The student's plasma form pulsed with frustration as she continued. "You're relying too heavily on your neural combat computer. The computer processes billion of combat scenarios per second," Zrthak objected, his voice crackling with defensive static. "It calculates the optimal response to any attack." "Exactly the problem." Jasmine gestured to the gathered students. "Anyone want to tell me why?" A serpentine cadet named Irixis raised her scaled head. "Because, optimal doesn't always mean effective?" "Precisely." Jasmine smiled, and by now most students had learned this wasn't a threat display. Combat isn't about perfection. It's about adaptation. Unpredictability. Sometimes the worst possible move technically is the best move strategically. Lieutenant Commander Nixis observed from the back of the arena, her crystalline form refracting patterns of intrigue. The human's teachings contradicted centuries of established combat doctrine, yet her results were undeniable. "Zrthak, attack me again," Jasmine commanded. "This time, disconnect from your combat computer." The energy being's form flickered with alarm. "But that's against all safety protocols. I could accidentally." "Trust me." The arena hummed with anticipation as Zrthak disconnected from his neural enhancers. His plasma form wavered uncertainly before stabilizing into a combat configuration. "Now," Jasmine said, dropping into a loose stance, "show me what you can really do." The resulting exchange left scorch marks on the arena's quantum-reinforced walls. Zrthak's attacks were wild, unpredictable, and infinitely more effective than his previous computer-guided attempts. Jasmine dodged and weaved through streams of plasma, occasionally redirecting his energy back at him in ways that defied several laws of physics. "Better," she called out, rolling under a particularly intense blast. Stop thinking about what you should do. Focus on what you can do. In the observation booth above the arena, Admiral Kexthar watched with his mandibles clenched tight enough to crack chitin. She's dismantling generations of combat training, he chittered to Nixus. It's chaos. It's working, the crystalline instructor countered, her form pulsing with excitement. Look at their improvement curves. Even you must admit. A proximity alarm cut her off. A sleek diplomatic vessel had entered Academy space without proper clearance. Moments later, the quantum communications array crackled to life. "This is Director Ophion of the Galactic Defense Council," a smoothly modulated voice announced. "I'm here for an unscheduled inspection." The Admiral's antennae twitched violently. Director Ophion retired 3 cycles ago. Down in the arena, Jasmine had gone completely still. Her students, picking up on her sudden tension, fell silent. "Admiral," she called up to the observation booth. "How often do council directors travel without an escort fleet?" "They don't," Kexthar responded, his compound eyes widening as implications cascaded through his tactical processors. "Security alert. All students to safe zones." This is not. The Academy's quantum shields collapsed with a thunderous crack of failing energy fields. The diplomatic vessel's elegant exterior shimmered and vanished, revealing a heavily armed warship. "Battle stations," the Admiral roared into the all-hands channel. "This is not a drill." But Jasmine was already moving. "Ziarthak, how good are you at overloading power systems?" The energy being's form crackled with newfound confidence. "Without my combat computer limiting me?" "Very good. Excellent. Irixis, your species can perceive quantum fluctuations, correct?" The serpentine cadet's scales rippled with surprise. "Yes, but..." "Perfect. The rest of you, remember what we just learned about unpredictability." Jasmine's voice carried the weight of command that transcended species. "They're expecting Academy protocols and standard responses. Let's show them something new." The warship's boarding pods were already launching, but Jasmine's students moved with purpose rather than panic. Ziarthak interfaced directly with the Academy's power grid, creating surge patterns that played havoc with the invaders' targeting systems. Irixis led a team of quantum-sensitive students in predicting where the boarding pods would breach. "This is madness," Admiral Kexthar observed as Jasmine organized the defense. "She's using cadets against professional warriors." "No," Nixus corrected, her crystalline form vibrating with sudden understanding. "She's using their natural abilities in ways the enemy won't expect. Just as she's been teaching them." The first boarding pod breached the Academy's outer wall, disgorging a squad of heavily armed mercenaries. They moved with cybernetically enhanced precision, their neural combat computers calculating optimal attack patterns. They never stood a chance. A wave of unleashed plasma from Ziarthak overloaded their shield generators. Irixis and her team appeared from quantum blind spots the mercenaries' computers insisted couldn't exist. And through it all moved Jasmine, her fluid fighting style making a mockery of targeting algorithms designed for predictable, programmed responses. "Impossible," Director Ophion's voice crackled through a damaged command channel. "Their combat efficiency ratings are barely cadet level." "That's your problem," Jasmine responded, disabling another mercenary with techniques that shouldn't have worked on his advanced armor. "You're still rating things." The battle for Centauri Prime Military Academy would later be classified as a training exercise gone wrong, the official report citing equipment malfunctions and protocol adjustments. But every student who fought that day understood the real lesson. In the aftermath, as damage control teams repaired quantum breaches and medical units treated minor injuries, Admiral Kexthar found Jasmine in the Academy's data center. The attack pattern matched 3 other raids on military installations, she explained before he could speak. Always after new defense protocols were implemented. Someone's been testing responses, gathering data. Today they learned something they didn't expect. The Admiral's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. That were stronger than they calculated? That were no longer predictable. Jasmine stood, stretching combat-stiffened muscles. Now, about tomorrow's class. I think it's time we discussed the human concept of guerrilla warfare. KXThar's translator struggled with the term, but he understood the gleam in her eyes perfectly well. Perhaps, he reflected, the Council hadn't lost their minds after all. Unconventional tactics. The Academy's grand simulation chamber had never seen anything quite like this. Sergeant Torres stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by a circle of students who, by all conventional military logic, should not have been able to work together. Combat isn't about strength, Jasmine demonstrated, easily redirecting a strike from a massive silicon-based student named Grek. The four-armed warrior's crystalline fist passed harmlessly overhead as she stepped inside his guard. It's about turning advantages into disadvantages, and disadvantages into advantages. Grek stumbled, his considerable mass working against him. But my species is naturally stronger. The combat computers say. Forget what the computers say, Jasmine interrupted, helping him regain his balance. What do your instincts tell you? From the observation deck, Lieutenant Commander Nixis watched with fascination as her crystalline form sparkled with analytical patterns. Admiral KXThar stood beside her, his mandibles working thoughtfully. The annual Inter-Academy Championships are in 3 days, he chittered softly. Are you certain about entering her students? They've earned their place, Nixis responded. Though I suspect the other academies won't know what to make of their methods. Below, Jasmine was pairing students in unexpected combinations. Ziarthak, the energy being, worked with Irixis, the serpentine quantum sensor. Grek found himself partnered with Pelna, a gravity-manipulating species barely a quarter his size. Traditional combat roles are limiting, Jasmine explained, moving between the pairs. Your supposed weaknesses can become your greatest strengths when used creatively. A new figure entered the observation deck, Commander Voss of the Strategic Operations Division, their exoskeleton humming with barely contained energy. Is it true? They demanded without preamble. You're letting untested combat philosophies represent the Academy? Watch, was all Nixis said in response. The training session had evolved into something that defied traditional combat classifications. Ziarthak would create plasma distortions that only Irixis could navigate, allowing the serpentine student to strike from seemingly impossible angles. Grek and Pelna had developed a fighting style that used the smaller student's gravity manipulation to enhance the Silicon Warrior's already impressive strength. Impossible, Voss muttered. Their neural combat interfaces aren't even synchronized. They're not using them, KXThar replied, a note of pride creeping into his chittering. That's the point. The Strategic Operations Commander watched in silence as Jasmine's students moved through increasingly complex scenarios. Their techniques shouldn't have worked, they violated countless established combat protocols and ignored generations of proven tactical doctrine. Yet the results were undeniable. The championships are more than just competition, Voss finally said. They're about maintaining standards. Tradition. If word of these, method spreads. Then perhaps it's time for tradition to evolve, a new voice interrupted. The quantum communications array shimmered to life, revealing the distinct energy signature of Council Representative Thrix. Especially given recent events. The senior officers snapped to attention, but Thrix waved away the formality. The attack on your academy wasn't an isolated incident. 3 other facilities have reported similar probing attempts. Director Ophiant's involvement is concerning. Down in the arena, Jasmine had moved her students into freeform combat exercises. The chamber's adaptive terrain shifted constantly, forcing them to improvise and adapt moment by moment. Ophion was more than just a council director, Thrix continued. Before his retirement, he headed our combat standardization protocols. Wrote half the neural combat programs we still use today. Understanding flickered through Nixus's crystalline form. Which means he knows exactly how our forces will respond to any situation. Precisely. Thrix's energy form pulsed with concern. We need something he can't predict. Something outside standard protocols. All eyes turned to the training floor, where Jasmine's students had just completed a combat sequence that would have been considered impossible a month ago. Commander Voss, Kexthar said quietly. I believe you're about to see exactly why we chose these students for the championships. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intensive training. Jasmine pushed her students harder than ever, but always in unexpected ways. Traditional combat drills were replaced with dance lessons from Earth. Neural interface training gave way to meditation techniques. Every standard protocol was examined, deconstructed, and reformed into something new. The championships aren't just about winning, Jasmine told her assembled students on the final evening of preparation. They're about showing a different way. A way that can't be predicted or programmed. Ziarthak's plasma form pulsed with newfound confidence. Like how you taught me to modulate my energy emissions randomly instead of following optimal patterns? Exactly. Each of you has natural abilities that go far beyond what any combat computer can quantify. She looked around the group, meeting each student's eyes, optical sensors, or sensory arrays. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what happens when we stop letting programs tell us what's possible. In the privacy of her quarters that night, Jasmine reviewed security footage from the attack on the Academy. Something about Ophion's tactics nagged at her combat-trained instincts. The precision was too perfect, the coordination too clean. A soft chime announced a visitor, Admiral Kexthar. The Council has confirmed 3 more attempted breaches at other facilities, he reported without preamble. All repelled, but they're learning from each attempt, Jasmine finished. Gathering data. Refining their approach. She gestured to the frozen footage. Sir, what if the championships aren't just about maintaining standards? What if they're about collecting combat data from every major academy in the galaxy? The Admiral's compound eyes reflected the holographic display as implications cascaded through his tactical processors. You think Ophion is using our own protocols against us? Yes. Jasmine stood, her expression determined. Which means tomorrow just became about more than winning a competition. We need to show him something he's never seen before. Something human? Kexthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Something better. Jasmine smiled. Something that combines the best of all our species. After all, isn't that what your academy is really about? As she spoke, her students were scattered throughout the academy, each preparing in their own way. Ziarthak practiced energy modulation patterns that defied standard physics. Irixis explored quantum frequencies no sensor was designed to detect. Grek and Pelnar refined combination moves that shouldn't have been possible. Tomorrow, they would show the galaxy that the future of combat wasn't about better programs or stronger weapons. It was about the one thing no computer could quantify, the infinite adaptability of life itself. The hidden threat. The Galactic Inter-Academy Championships transformed the space station Nexus 7 into a showcase of military might. Combat vessels from 17 different academies filled the surrounding space, their hull designs reflecting the diverse approaches to warfare across the galaxy. Sergeant Torres stood with her team in their designated preparation area, watching the massive holographic displays showing previous matches. Traditional combat doctrine was on full display, perfectly executed maneuvers, flawless tactical responses, and neural-enhanced coordination. They're all using standard combat protocols, Ziarthak observed, his plasma form flickering with newfound tactical awareness. Every move is optimized. Which makes them predictable, Arixis added, her serpentine scales rippling with anticipation. Just like you taught us, Sergeant. Jasmine nodded, but her attention was divided. Something about the station's security patterns felt off. The guard rotations were too perfect, the sensor sweeps too precise. It reminded her of the Academy attack. Remember, she addressed her team, no neural interfaces. No combat computers. Trust your instincts and each other. Admiral Kexthar appeared at the entrance to their preparation area, his chiton gleaming under the station's lights. Sergeant, a moment? In the corridor outside, the Admiral's mandibles clicked with tension. 3 more academies reported security breaches last night. Minor intrusions, quickly contained, but... Let me guess, Jasmine interrupted. Their defense responses were recorded and analyzed? Precisely. The Admiral's compound eyes reflected the passing security drones. The Council is concerned. These championships gather combat data from every major training facility in the galaxy. If someone wanted to test our collective defensive capabilities, it would be the perfect opportunity, Jasmine finished. Her combat instincts were screaming now. Sir, request permission to. Attention all participants, the station's announcement system interrupted. First-round matchups are now displayed. The massive screens shifted, showing the tournament brackets. Centauri Prime was matched against the Rigelian War College, known for their absolute adherence to traditional combat doctrine. Perfect, Jasmine muttered. Time to show them something new. The tournament arena was a technological marvel, its programmable matter capable of generating any combat environment imaginable. For the first round, it had configured itself into a multi-level urban warfare scenario. The Rigelian team emerged from their deployment zone in perfect formation, their neural interfaces synchronized, their movements a textbook example of tactical efficiency. Their commander, a towering arthropoid, radiated confidence. Combat protocols indicate your team's configuration is highly suboptimal, he announced through the translator field. Perhaps you should. His tactical analysis was interrupted by Grek launching Pelna using localized gravity manipulation, sending the smaller student through a gap in their formation that their combat computers insisted couldn't exist. Before the Rigelians could adapt, Ziarthak filled the area with randomized plasma bursts that played havoc with their sensor systems. Impossible, the Rigelian commander sputtered as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. The combat algorithms. That's your problem, Jasmine called from her observation position. You're still trusting algorithms. The match ended in under 5 minutes. The Rigelian team's neural interfaces were overwhelmed trying to process combat techniques that defied their programming. Their perfect formations and optimized responses fell apart against opponents who refused to follow standard protocols. But Jasmine barely registered their victory. Her attention was on the station's security systems, which had shifted patterns during the match. The changes were subtle, microsecond alterations in sensor sweeps, tiny adjustments in drone patrols. The kind of changes someone would make if they were probing for weaknesses. Lieutenant Commander Nixus materialized beside her, the crystalline officer's form pulsing with concern. You noticed it too? Someone's using the tournament as cover, Jasmine confirmed. Each match provides combat data, shows how different academies respond to unexpected situations. She paused as another realization hit. And with all the best combat instructors gathered in one place. We're vulnerable, Nixus finished. Her crystalline structure vibrated with sudden understanding. The next attack won't be a probe. As if summoned by her words, the station's quantum communication array crackled with interference. The tournament displays flickered, momentarily showing lines of code before returning to normal. Get me Admiral Kexthar, Jasmine commanded. And tell our team to prepare for a real fight. The next round of the tournament was announced, but Jasmine's focus was elsewhere. She watched as Zrthak interfaced with the station's power systems, his plasma form detecting subtle fluctuations that the security systems missed. Irixis used her quantum sensitivity to map anomalies in the station's defensive shields. The pattern is similar to the Academy attack, Grek reported, his crystalline form processing sensor data. But larger. More sophisticated. Because this time they're not testing, Jasmine realized. This is the real thing. They're going to use our own combat protocols against us. The station's lights flickered again, and this time the security drones faltered in their patrols. In the tournament arena, the programmable matter shimmered with unscheduled changes. Admiral Kexthar burst into their preparation area, his chitin crackling with static. We've detected unauthorized access attempts across multiple systems. Someone's trying to. The lights went out. When they returned a moment later, the tournament displays showed a familiar face. Greetings, Academies, Director Ophiant's smooth voice filled the station. Welcome to your final exam. Victory through innovation. Nexus 7 station plunged into controlled chaos as Director Ophiant's face dominated every display screen. Emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow as security systems failed in cascading patterns. For too long, we've let our combat doctrine grow soft, Ophiant's smooth voice echoed through the corridors. We've accepted inferior species, diluted our training. Today, I prove why standardization is the only path to true military excellence. Jasmine Torres stood in the center of her team's preparation area, mind racing through combat scenarios. Around her, representatives from 17 different academies were falling into their trained responses, exactly as Ophiant expected. He's not just attacking the station, she announced, drawing everyone's attention. He's attacking our entire combat doctrine. And we're going to prove him wrong. She turned to her students. Time to show the galaxy what real adaptation looks like. Admiral Kexthar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed tactical data. Station defenses are compromised. Security drones are reverting to basic protocols. Which means they're predictable, Jasmine interrupted. Zrthak, remember how you learned to modulate your plasma emissions randomly? The energy being's form pulsed with understanding. I can disrupt their control signals. But I'll need coverage. You'll have it, Grek rumbled, his crystalline form shifting into combat configuration. Pelna, think you can manipulate gravity fields to protect him? The smaller student's gravitational sensors rippled with confidence. Just like in practice, but this time with feeling. Jasmine smiled. This was what she'd been training them for, not just to fight, but to think creatively, to combine their abilities in ways no combat computer could predict. Lieutenant Commander Nixis, she called to the crystalline officer. We need to coordinate with the other academies. Show them there's another way. The station shuddered as Ophiant's forces began their assault. Warships decloaked in precise formation, their weapons already charging. Inside, security systems turned against their users as combat drones activated with ruthless efficiency. But this time, they faced something their programs couldn't calculate. Zrthak soared through the corridors, his plasma form protected by Pelna's gravity manipulation while Grek provided physical coverage. Together, they created a moving zone of chaos that disrupted drone control signals and created safe passages for evacuating students. Irixis led a team of quantum-sensitive students through maintenance shafts, using their natural abilities to detect and avoid security sweeps. They moved like ghosts through the station's infrastructure, sabotaging Ophiant's control systems with techniques no AI could anticipate. In the main security hub, Jasmine worked with Admiral Kexthar and representatives from other academies, coordinating a defense that broke every rule in the combat manuals. Rigelian War College, your neural interfaces can sync with the station's power grid, she directed. Don't try to control it, random power fluctuations will work in our favor. Arcturus Academy, those sonic attacks of yours? Use them to create interference patterns, not direct damage. On the main display, Ophiant's expression shifted from confidence to confusion as his carefully calculated attack met resistance that defied tactical analysis. "This is impossible," his voice boomed through the station. "Your combat efficiency ratings mean nothing," Jasmine interrupted, her voice carrying to every corner of the station through hijacked communication systems. "You spent so long perfecting your algorithms, you forgot what combat really is. It's not about perfection. It's about adaptation." Outside, Ophiant's warships found themselves engaging targets that moved in patterns their targeting computers couldn't predict. Inside, their boarding parties encountered resistance that seemed to break the laws of physics. Ziarthak's plasma form danced through their ranks, his energy emissions scrambling their neural interfaces. Grek and Pelna turned corridors into gravitational mazes where up and down lost all meaning. Irixis and her team appeared from quantum blind spots to disable key systems before vanishing again. And through it all moved Jasmine's students, fighting with techniques that combined the best of their species' natural abilities with human adaptability. Each engagement was unique, unpredictable, impossible to counter with programmed responses. In the security hub, Admiral Kexthar's compound eyes reflected the tactical displays showing Ophiant's forces falling into disarray. "They can't adapt," he realized. "Their neural networks are too rigidly programmed." "Exactly," Jasmine confirmed. "They're fighting the last war, using tactics designed for enemies that think like they do. But the galaxy's changing. Combat is changing." The final confrontation came as Ophiant himself led a desperate assault on the security hub. His combat armor was a masterpiece of engineering, loaded with every advanced weapon system available. His neural interfaces gave him perfect tactical awareness and split-second response time. He never stood a chance. Jasmine's students moved like a single organism, each playing to their unique strengths while covering others' weaknesses. Every perfect attack was met with an impossible defense. Every calculated strategy fell apart against responses that no combat computer could have predicted. "My algorithms are perfect," Ophiant snarled as his attacks met empty air. "Your techniques violate every proven combat principle." "That's the point," Jasmine replied, moving through his guard with fluid grace. "Real combat isn't about principles. It's about this." The final strike came not from weapons or technology, but from the combined natural abilities of 5 different species working in perfect harmony. Ophiant's advanced armor, designed to counter every known combat technique, had no defense against what it couldn't comprehend. In the aftermath, as Council security forces took Ophiant into custody, Admiral Kexthar found Jasmine watching her students help with repairs. "The Council wants to know how to replicate your training methods," he chittered softly. "They're talking about standardizing your techniques." Jasmine laughed. "They're missing the point. It was never about the techniques. It was about learning to think differently. To adapt. To combine our strengths in new ways." She watched as Ziarthak helped restore power systems while discussing plasma modulation theory with fascinated engineers. Nearby, Grek and Pelna were teaching other students their gravity manipulation combinations. Irixis led a workshop on quantum awareness techniques that drew attendees from every academy. "Look at them," Jasmine said proudly. "They're not just fighting differently, they're thinking differently. Learning from each other. That's the real victory." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps it's time we updated the Academy's motto. Something about strength through diversity? How about this?" Jasmine suggested, watching her students continue to break down barriers between species and combat styles. "Victory through innovation." Above them, the station's displays showed the tournament rankings, now meaningless in light of recent events. But something more important had been won, a new understanding that the future of combat lay not in better algorithms or stronger weapons, but in the infinite adaptability of life itself. And somewhere in the station's repaired systems, combat computers began incorporating new variables into their calculations: creativity, unpredictability, and the simple fact that sometimes the best move is the one that no program could ever predict.